This is an extremely modest piece of legislation that does virtually nothing to address the enormous crises that working families all across this country are facing today. This reconciliation bill falls far short of what the American people want, what they need, and what they are begging us to do. It is the only opportunity that we have to do something significant for the American people that requires only 50 votes and that cannot be filibustered. In other words, this is the opportunity, because on anything significant, we're not going to get 60 votes. So this, in my view, is a moment that should not be squandered. Mr. President, let us do what we too rarely do here in the Congress or in the corporate media, and that is take a hard look at the reality of what is going on in our country today. Very often we sit here and we argue about this, we argue about that, but we don't take a look at what's going on in America today, especially among working people and lower income people who do not have paid lobbyists here trying to get us to pass legislation to benefit them. People back home are just too busy working 50, 60 hours a week, trying to make it on Social Security, trying to deal with their student debt. They don't have the lobbyists here that the drug companies and the insurance companies and the fossil fuel industry has. What's going on in America today? For a start, in the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people live paycheck to paycheck. And because of inflation, a bad situation has been made worse. Millions of people today are wondering how they're going to pay their rent, how they're going to buy the food to feed their kids, how they're going to pay off their debt. That is what's going on for half of the people in our country. I know we don't talk about them. They have no representation here, no lobbyists, no nothing, but that is the reality. Does this reconciliation bill address their needs? Does it raise the minimum wage to a living wage? Or do we continue to allow so many workers to try to get by on 10, 12, 13 bucks an hour? Does this bill make it easier for workers who want to join a union to be able to do so, or they continue to be attacked by their employers, making it hard to form a union? No, this bill does nothing to address that reality. President, at a time when, tragically, this country has the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth, does this bill extend the $300 a month per child tax credit that was so important to millions of families last year? Does it address that issue? Does it say that maybe there is something wrong when millions of children in this country are dealing with hunger and with other basic human needs? No, not a word in this bill addresses that. In my state of Vermont and around this country, families are paying on average about $15,000 a year for childcare, if they are lucky enough to find a slot. $15,000 a year. It's one-third of the salary of a family making $45,000. I don't know how people can afford childcare. And meanwhile, childcare workers earn horrifically low wages and poor benefits. At a time when we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, does this bill address the dysfunctionality of our childcare system? No, not a word. At a time when over 70 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured, when we spend twice as much per capita on health care as the people of almost any other major country, while insurance companies make tens and tens of billions of dollars a year in profit, when 60 million people a year die because they can't afford to get to a doctor when they are sick because they're uninsured or underinsured, does this bill do anything to help us create a rational, cost-effective health care system which guarantees health care for all as a human right, something that every other major country on earth does? No, the bill does nothing to address the extraordinary health care crisis that we face. President, at a time when 45 million Americans are struggling to pay student debt, and when hundreds of thousands of bright young people every year are unable to fulfill their dreams, unable to get a higher education because they cannot afford the high cost of higher education in this country, does this bill do anything to make it easier for young people to get a higher education? No, guess not. Doesn't do a thing. Doesn't do a thing on student debt. 55% of senior citizens in our country are trying to survive on incomes of $25,000 a year or less, which is something hard for me to understand, really is. Think about being 80, 90 years of age, trying to make it on $25,000 a year. Maybe your spouse has died. I don't know how you do it, but more than half of the people in our country who are seniors are trying to do that. Many of these seniors cannot afford to go to a dentist. And in Vermont, and I suspect in Arizona as well, there are senior citizens walking around without teeth in their mouth or with teeth that are rotting. There are seniors all over this country who cannot communicate with their kids or grandchildren because they can't afford a hearing aid. They can't watch TV because they can't afford a decent pair of glasses. Is there anything in the currently written bill to expand Medicare to do what some 75, 80% of the American people think we should do, and that is expand Medicare to cover dental care for seniors, hearing aids, and eyeglasses? No, this bill doesn't touch that at all. And when we talk about our seniors and disabled Americans, does this legislation do anything to help the millions who would prefer to stay in their homes rather than be forced into nursing homes? It's an issue I hear quite frequently in Vermont. Can't find help for someone to come to my house to help my mother or my disabled father. Does this bill address the crisis of home health care? Very serious crisis. No, not a word. I think there is no disagreement that we have a major housing crisis in America. Some 600,000 Americans are homeless, and nearly 18 million households are spending an incredible 50% of their limited incomes for housing. Everybody acknowledges that we have a major housing crisis and that rents are soaring. Does this bill, which supposedly represents the needs of the American people, even deal with housing? One word? No, it doesn't. I understand that in our politics today, super PACs and billionaires play an enormous role in what we do here and what we don't do. Just yesterday, we saw the power of billionaire super PACs electing corporate candidates who represent their interest and defeating candidates who represent working families. That's the way the political system is. It's been made worse since Citizens United. But right now, in our country, and I know we don't talk about it very much, I hear almost no discussion on the floor, we have more income and wealth inequality than any time in 100 years. How do the American people feel knowing that 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society? Does that sound like the America we believe in, the America we think we should be? We talk about Russia and Putin and the oligarchy over there. It's true. An oligarchy robs the country blind. We have an oligarchy here as well. 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. The top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%. 45% of all new income goes to the top 1%. And what we have seen during the pandemic is billionaires becoming much richer while working people by the thousands die because they had to go to work to make a living. Today, CEOs of large corporations make 350 times more than their average workers. That's what's going on in America. I know we don't talk about it because we don't want to offend the people who fund our campaigns. It makes them uncomfortable to talk about how much inequality we have in this country, but that is the reality. Mr. President, not only do we have income and wealth inequality, we have another issue we don't talk about much, maybe a little bit. That is, we have more concentration of ownership than at any time in the modern history of this country. In sector after sector after sector, we have a handful of giant multinational corporations often engaging in price fixing, who control what is produced and how much we pay for it. And I think many Americans now notice that at a time when we're paying increased costs at the gas pump, increased costs at grocery stores for food, surprise, 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 these large corporations are making record-breaking profits. Paying $5 for a gallon of gas, well, the good news is ExxonMobil and these other corporations are making huge profits. Unbelievably, Mr. President, 3 Wall Street firms now control assets of over $20 trillion. That is the GDP of the United States of America, controlled by 3 Wall Street firms. That of concern to anybody? Might be something we might want to talk about in a reconciliation bill? Nah, can't do that. These are very powerful guys, and we're not supposed to offend the wealthy and the powerful. These three Wall Street firms are the major stockholders in 96% of S&P 500 companies. Check out companies that products that you buy. Find out who owns them. Find out who owns the companies that you are familiar with, and time and time and time again, you will find that the major stockholders are these three Wall Street firms: BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard. Does this bill do anything to even begin addressing the enormous concentration of ownership in our country and make our economy more competitive? Not a word. So my point, Mr. President, is that we are living in a moment of unprecedented crises. This bill does virtually nothing to address any of them.